Stand by.
Am I good?
Stand by.
Good evening, everyone. Are we ready to go, Matt?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure. Good evening, everyone. We are calling to order the regular meeting of the school board on Monday, April 13th, 2020. Mr. Ratchford, the roll, please.
Mrs. Barker.
Here.
Mr. Bryant.
Here.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Here.
Mr. Mannheim.
Here.
Mrs. McCabe.
Here.
Mr. McNally.
Here.
Ms. Weibel.
Here. Can we stand for the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation.
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. Just to clarify, this is obviously a virtual meeting using Zoom again. We are safe in our homes, making sure we're keeping our social distance and washing our hands due to COVID-19 pandemic. I just want to remind everyone that when you go to speak, please unmute yourself. And when you are not speaking, please mute yourself. I will keep an eye on our participants here. If you have something to say and we cannot see, hit the raise hand and we will make sure you are heard from before we move on. I apologize for the double visual audio again. I still am having technical difficulties in my home. We are hoping to upgrade with our current server. It's later in the week, so maybe next week it'll be different, maybe not. So thank you very much for coming, being here tonight. I'm going to see if there's any citizen comments. Let's see, Mr. Smith, do we have, I'm used to going to Mrs. Smith, sorry. No relation there. Mr. Smith, do we have any citizen comments?
We do have one citizen comment.
If you could, before it's played, Mrs. Barker, could you read the statement, please?
Sure thing.
Thank you.
The school code provides for a public comment period at each board meeting, subject to reasonable constraints. The practice of this board is to limit public comment to 3 minutes per speaker to a total of 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. Speakers addressing the board are expected to maintain a reasonable level of civility. Also, personnel matters are sensitive and confidential. Comments regarding individuals should be respectful. Insults and defamatory remarks have no place in this setting. The board will terminate public comment if speakers cannot adhere to these guidelines. Please identify yourself at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you, Mrs. Barker. Once again, we are going to be playing our audio public comments that have been pre-recorded for us earlier today. Mr. Smith.
The comment is from Michelle Casile regarding the last committee meeting we held. Please give me a moment to share my audio and play it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I closed the window. 1 second.
Michelle Casile. I sent the board an email last week because at the committee meeting, the board asked more questions about the number of towels used by high school athletes instead of asking any questions about K-12 instruction, curriculum, and resources. For the most part, I found the live meeting informative and easy to follow. The business services meeting and summary of agenda items was clear and questions were easy to follow. The business services team did an excellent job. The learning and teaching part of the meeting was very difficult to follow without a brief summary of each agenda item. While the presentations were available to the public during the meeting, the public does not have the ability to ask administration questions about the information before it's presented to the board. Furthermore, learning and teaching agenda topics are the most important topics for our district since they affect students and teachers directly in the classroom. The public expects some level of understanding of the topic and correlation to academic outcomes and benchmarks. These were not mentioned during the meeting. In the end, the board is responsible for the results. And if we are going to approve $1.3 million in curriculum and resources, outcomes and benchmarks should be attached to each presentation. I look forward to seeing an improvement in presentation format for future L&T meetings. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Casile, for that comment. We will be getting back to you on that. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Pearson for the superintendent's report.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Weibel. Good evening, everyone. I just have, believe it or not, we just had a meeting last Wednesday night, so we've only had a couple of days since then, and I was able to give a fairly comprehensive update at that meeting about some of the things that have been going on in the district related to remote learning. So I have 4 things that I also wanted to talk about tonight that have either happened since then or some additional updates that I want to share with the board and with the community. First of all, it's hard to believe that we are in the midst of all of this that's going on with COVID-19, already talking about our planning for next year. This is the time of year that we are in the throes of planning for next year. And I wanted to make sure that I mentioned tonight that we are at a place right now in our timeline that we are accepting intra-district transfer requests from families. So if parents or family members are interested in having their child attend a school that's different from the zone school that they are supposed to attend, the form to request that intra-district transfer is posted on the website. And you're going to want to go on and complete that so that we have that information. The window for those requests closes on Monday the 20th, 4/20/2020 at 4 p.m. Now, this is only for elementary schools. Right now, it's the elementary process that I'm talking about. So if you want to request an intra-district transfer for elementary, it's through Monday the 20th at 4 p.m. Middle schools and high schools follow a different process, so they don't use this window, and you have to meet certain criteria for middle school and high school. So just elementary. The other issue that I wanted to mention is that we are going to actually be doing online registration this year. Interestingly enough, we had planned to do that this spring prior to all of the remote learning and staying at home that we're doing right now. And so we are ready to actually push out at the end of this month a registration form for returning students. So if your child currently attends one of our schools, you will be receiving a registration packet and information from the district about registration at the end of the month. So be looking for that communication. We'll send several reminders that will come from principals as well, but we'll be having you do your registration for next year online, which will help with the completion of the forms and also getting those turned in, as well as updating our student information systems. So that's coming at the end of the month. I also wanted to talk a little bit about remote learning. Last week, we started taking attendance on remote learning. For 6th through 12th grade, we use a form, and for elementary schools, teachers are keeping track of students that are participating in the remote learning process. I have some preliminary data for middle schools and high schools. We had 78% of our students last week complete the form for remote learning at the middle school and high school. There are students that are engaging in learning that didn't complete the form, so we're working on ensuring that students understand the process for attendance each week and that how we will go about collecting that. We're also sending reminders to students who maybe have worked on their remote learning but haven't actually completed the attendance form, to try to have as accurate a picture as possible of how many students are participating in our remote learning online. We are taking attendance. We do want students to complete the attendance form so that we know that they're participating. And if you don't do it, then we're going to also probably be following up with you just to see what's going on, to see if there's anything that we can do to help, to make sure that you have the resources and support to be successful with our remote learning process. So each Monday, the form is pushed out for students to complete, and then that helps us track attendance. So like I said, last week it was at 78%, which is okay, considering that it was our first weekend trying to capture attendance this way, and we're going to continue to monitor that going forward. I also want to talk a little bit about some of the big events that are coming up in the month of May and April. Of course, through April the 30th, our facilities are closed and we don't have any in-building activities. And as we look at some of the larger events that are scheduled for the month of May, we're starting to have to make some decisions about those events. There was communication that went out to families last week about prom. Unfortunately, prom was initially scheduled for May the 2nd, which is immediately following the end of the current stay-at-home period. Because of all the contracts that are involved and the amount of money that's spent on that event, our schools were able to get a credit from the venues for a future event. It can go towards next year prom at that particular location, but they didn't lose the money or the deposit. But we are going to have to cancel prom that was scheduled for May the 2nd. We are looking for some alternate activities and opportunities to celebrate and recognize our students as we approach the end of the school year. And that's something that the schools and the students will be talking more about, to see if there are ways that we will be able to celebrate this milestone in their educational experience, even though we have the current stay-at-home situation. So that's prom. And then we also, of course, had graduation scheduled at the end of May. All indications right now are that those large scale events are not going to be allowed to continue at that time, even at the end of May. We still have that date reserved with NIU, but we also secured an alternate date for the end of the summer. So we have secured Saturday, July the 25th, as a potential alternate date for graduation. The graduation times are 10 o'clock and 1:30. So 10 o'clock and 1:30, they are holding that day and those times on their calendar for us, should we choose or need to hold a celebration at that time. There is a graduation survey that went to senior parents and students from principals, and we'll be looking at that data to make a decision. But we thought that it was important for us to go ahead and find a tentative date and time, as the facility fills up very quickly. Many of the other school districts that use their facility for graduation have also secured alternate graduation times and dates around that same time period. So I wanted to make sure that we were able to have something. So tentatively July 25th as an alternate date at NIU. The times again are 10 and 1 o'clock. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about today. So that completes the superintendent's report. Thank you, Ms. Weibel.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pearson. You said 10 and 1:30, just to clarify. The second time you said 10 and 1. Do we have, really quick before we move on, any update regarding our food resources? Or is that going along really smoothly with our multiple locations now, or where are we at with that?
Great, thank you for asking, because I actually had that on my list here and I skipped right over it. We have actually seen our food distribution nearly double from prior to spring break to after spring break. After we added those additional locations, we are serving approximately 500 meals a day to students at each of our locations. Today was actually our highest participation on a Monday. One of the other pieces that's interesting is we've seen a significant increase in our secondary students, our high school students in particular, participating in the program. Since we have the satellite delivery that's happening as well. So it seems that people are taking advantage of the meal opportunities. I would like to just remind people that any student in our district can have breakfast and lunch every day. You don't have to be a participant in a specific program to be able to do that. It is available to all District 303 students. So if you would like to pick up a lunch or a breakfast, please feel free to do so. Additionally, we're also getting information later this week about possible summer meal distribution, which is something that we may be asked to do by the state. And so we'll be getting that information and getting that out to families once that becomes available. But for now, we do have the increased distribution and opportunity for all students to participate in our pickup program.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Mrs. Fairgrave, you had a question. Was it answered?
I was just following up to a couple of items that I raised at our committee meeting last week related to summer school, and if the stay-at-home order continues past April 30th, how are we addressing finals at the middle school?
I think
And
just to
also
finish your
ratings
sentence,
at this point, I think would be.
okay, you're cutting out, but I think you were asking about finals at the middle school and high school level.
Yeah, our teachers and staff are working right now to plan for finals at the middle school and the high school level. I think the one thing to remember, or what's really most important for us to know, is what skills and new learning have students acquired, especially during this time of remote learning. We want to be sure to have some information about that as we plan for whenever it is that we return to school. So there will be some kind of assessment that we will be giving. I'm quite certain that it will not take the same format that our typical exams take. It will probably be a sampling of questions from the exam that capture the essential questions, but we're still working on planning for that and what that might look like. I'm sure you all are aware that even the AP test has completely changed their format. It's going to be a shorter online assessment for those AP courses. And we're going to probably follow a similar format for our high school exams in particular, as we try to identify and ensure that students have acquired the knowledge and skills necessary really for that course, and then also for planning for their future experiences when they return to school. So that's still in the planning process. And then I believe there was one other question, Ms. Fairgrave.
I think we lost her to technical. I think she was asking about finals and what would we do in regards if we were to be longer than April 30th, the communication to our community.
Yeah, as soon as we know what's going to happen next, we certainly will get that out. We don't have any information at this time, and of course that decision will be made by the governor's office. So once we have information to share, we will immediately turn around and share that. Fortunately, the remote learning process that we have in place is a procedure that we could continue as long as schools remain to be closed.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Pearson, for clarifying those items. As we've talked about in the past, I should say in our one meeting past last Wednesday, the ISB has recommended, as other boards are following, for boards to only cover essential items. So we've tried to do that. And unfortunately, in doing that, we've talked to the ISB, and at this time, they are not covering trainings yet. So we had a training scheduled for May 4th for superintendent goal setting. That is at this time not covered. They don't have the capacity to do it virtually, unfortunately. So we are kind of waiting for ISB's guidance on what they want to do with that. That will not keep us from doing Dr. Pearson's one-year evaluation, which should be done by the beginning of July. What we can do is those goals that we were going to set for the 2021 year, we can still continue to do that. And then if we wanted to still have that training and it's not something we can do until later in the summer, we can just release those goals a little bit later. Unfortunately, it's just something we can't do in May. I know we were looking at trying to do them coincidingly with the end of our evaluation so we can put out the new goals right away. So just to give the board a little heads up that is going on. Of course, with COVID-19, lots of things are changing and are being putting on hold, and we're having to adapt to it. So in addition to adapting to that, we are not going to do committee reports tonight because we just had our meetings on Wednesday, and we had spent quite a long time on Zoom. So Zoom is such a wonderful tool for us to utilize for meetings. It is a very difficult tool to follow for several hours, however, for those involved as well as public that watches. So all of our minutes are here in our consent agenda tonight, which will encompass everything we talked about in learning and teaching. It'll encompass everything we spoke about in business services as well, and those were just last Wednesday. A lot of those items that we did discuss and talked about moving forward to tonight's agenda. For instance, the curriculum we have discussed at different meetings over the course of the year. So it was a great opportunity for us to kind of see the final recommendation from those different groups of teachers that have been recommending to us all year for different resources and new programs. So this is the final end of a year-long project for us. So it's great to see all their hard work and what's going to be happening next year for our kiddos. So I did want to just give a little bit of update, and I'll ask my board members to chime in here at the end and I just want to thank our board chairs for that. So Mr. McNally, Mrs. Barker, Mr. Mannheim, and Mrs. Fairgree, thank you for working so hard on those committees last week. For Citizen Advisory Committee, right now I've spoken with Ms. Barker and Ms. McCabe, and the April 23rd meeting, I believe they're going to extend out to the executive committee. They may be in touch with different members for surveys regarding some of our outreach during COVID-19 and how we can effectively communicate with different demographics of our district community. So I don't know, ladies, if you want to add anything else regarding the CAC.
Our plan.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Our plan is to meet with the exec committee, and that also will be virtual, and we'll plan out, but I think you summarized it well, Mrs.
Okay, great. Thank you. Also, Mrs. McCabe and I will be joining a virtual DPTO meeting on this Wednesday, the 15th. So that'll be a new experience for us as well. And then Dr. Pearson and I attended a virtual intergovernmental meeting on April the 9th. And obviously with our government partners, we had a lot to discuss regarding COVID. The city talked about how they've been talking about to the public what is happening with the King County resources, Delnor resources, what we need to do for social distancing, some of the same things we've touched on. The library talked about how they are going to be a 2-week delay moving in. So if the all clear comes from the governor April 30th, then they will move in 2 weeks later. If it does not, whenever that date is, they will move in 2 weeks after that date. And in regards to the parks, they talked about how the trails are open and that the parks, any touch surfaces on the parks are closed, so restrooms as well as playgrounds. But the trails are open. They continue to ask people to please use social distancing on the pathways and trails and make sure that you're respectful to other people out there. And I think that was it. Dr. Pearson, is there anything of highlight that we want to address?
No, I just think it's important to mention that we have really great relationships with our intergovernmental partners. And because of that, particularly in a time like this when we're coordinating resources for the community, it shows that we have those relationships established. And I'm extremely appreciative of the city and the library district and the park district for partnering with us to meet the needs of the students and families in our community.
That's perfectly said. Thank you so much. So again, thank you to all of our committees, our joint committee from last week. Is there anyone else that would like to, in regards to the rest of our committees, sorry, that we have reported on, currently they're not meeting. So before we move off of committee reports, is there anything else anyone wants to comment on? I see no hands. Sorry, I'm just checking. I see no one speaking. Okay. All right. So for action, our first item for action is for the board to approve the Northeast Academy timeline. Can I please have a motion to approve the Northeast Academy timeline?
So moved.
Mr. McNally, thank you.
Second.
And Mr. Mannheim, thank you. As our second. So we have, before we go into discussion, I believe we have someone giving us a brief overview of our timeline again, just to remind us of what that is. I can't remember who that is.
I'm going to just share with you a little bit about that, Ms. Weibel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what we're actually asking you to approve tonight is the hiring of the director for the Northeast Academy, who will actually begin hopefully sometime around the 1st of July. That person will come on board to work with us next year in planning for our programming at Northeast Academy, as well as the identification of students that might benefit from this programming, and supervise the application process for those students, and also the hiring of additional staff in the future. One of the questions that came up on Wednesday night that I wanted to make sure that I clearly answered, the ALOP, Northeast Academy is a program that actually qualifies for state funding, for grant funding, through a program called ALOP, which is Alternative Learning Opportunities Program. The state is actually looking for ways, and has looked for ways in the past, and there are also incentives and funding available from federal sources to provide programming and opportunities for students that meet criteria where they might benefit from an alternative setting. And so our Northeast Academy program is something that we're hoping to design around that criteria and address some of the needs in our community of students that are at risk for not graduating from high school in particular, as well as students that may need an alternate schedule or alternate experience. So much of, or at least almost half of what we expect our program, a little more than half, to cost, it can be covered through ALOP grants. Right now we're estimating a total cost of about $665,000 a year once the program is up and running completely. That includes 9 staff members. When we kind of take out or take into consideration the staff positions that would basically follow students from the high schools to Northeast Academy, that takes out about $110,000 from that amount. The $385,000 from what we anticipate we would get from ALOP and other grant funds leaves an annual cost of approximately $170,000. Is what we think this program will cost from our district budget after we take those other factors into consideration. Now, one of the things that we hope is that our director, once hired and on board, will provide us with a more detailed and comprehensive budget around the programming as we look at what the needs are there. But those are our cost estimates. So what we're asking you to approve right now, I know this question came up about the cost, but what we're asking you to approve tonight is the hiring of the director, as well as kind of the implementation timeline, which would be next year being a planning year, and then the following year beginning to bring some students on board at that particular program.
So Dr. Pearson, just to clarify, the full cost of the program that you're talking about is not something that we would even anticipate seeing for probably 4 to 5 years, or 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, it probably will cost us about that much money starting in the 2021-22 school year. So not next year, but the following year. Once we do bring students on board at the program, we're looking at hopefully having approximately 100 students, I believe, in that first year with the administrator and the social worker and the teachers. We think our district cost will be about $170,000. And then of course, we would have some reimbursement from the grant dollars after the fact.
Right.
So,
okay, so that is the first year, 21-22.
Yes.
Okay. So it's sooner than I thought, but it's still not next year in particular. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, all we're asking for next year is the actual position of the director.
So we'll have an idea from our facility utilization, for instance, as to what our needs are in the district by then, and to see how this would potentially sink in with that.
Yeah, I think that the timelines for our facility utilization plan and the Northeast Academy align nicely. Please remember that we currently are offering some credit recovery and night school experiences under the umbrella of a Northeast Academy type program after school and in the evening at our high schools right now. So there are already some students that are taking advantage of the opportunity for credit recovery and to accumulate some additional credits towards graduation. So there are a few students that are already participating in a program like what we're hoping to have in the Northeast Academy umbrella.
Okay, great. Mr. Bryant, I see you have a question.
Yes. So much of the funding for the program is going to be coming from grant funds. With the current situation we're in right now, I guess there's a lot of uncertainty with possibly, what's going to be happening at both the state and federal levels. Do we have to be concerned about any grant funds possibly drying up for this program?
That's a great question, and I wish I could tell you that no, that all that money would always be available, but unfortunately, there are state dollars involved, and anytime that happens, they have to make some prioritization related to how they fund programs. I will tell you that no matter what, there has been funding for these types of programs for quite some time. They are really important and to schools and communities to be able to provide services to students who might benefit from this type of program, and it's a priority both at the federal level and at the state level. So although I could see that there might be a reduction in funds that are available as a potential, without kind of knowing for sure what the ultimate impact is going to be on state funding, it's hard to predict. But I also believe that there will continue to be money available for programs like this in school districts going forward.
Okay, that's a good question. Does anyone have any other questions or clarifying points before we ask for the roll on this? I don't see any hands. Okay. Mrs. Radford, the roll call, please.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve, Mrs. Fairgrieve,
I see her on here.
right.
Ms. Fairgrave, can you repeat that, please?
Perhaps a head nod.
I was going to say maybe a nod or a no. Ms. Weibel,
Okay.
will you confirm that that was a no for Mrs. Fairgrieve?
Mrs. Fairgrave, was that a no? Thumbs up, it's a no? Okay, it's a no for Mrs. Fairgrave.
Thank you.
Confirmed.
Mr. Mannheim,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel.
Yes. All right, motion passes 6-1. Sorry for the interesting way of voting, but we got it done. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
I appreciate everyone voting with their due diligence and what's in their hearts. So, all right, moving on. Item B. This was an item we had questions on, so we put on for action. It is the resources for 9 through 12 wellness. Can I have a motion for that, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McNally.
Second.
Mr. Bryant is the second. Thank you. And I believe Mrs. Barker is going to just give us a little refresher on what this entailed during the meeting.
Sure. What it really entails is that the Introduction to Sports Medicine and Athletic Training course really needed kind of a makeover. The materials and the resources were from 2005, 15 years ago. And the CDT team came up with a set of materials and also some equipment that came with it. And there was some question because of the amount It was over 65,000. So part of the discussion included needing a list, an itemized list of what those equipment and resources were. So if you would refer to page 12 in your packet, you'll be able to see that itemized list. And it really ranges from things from an Apple Pencil for an iPad, all the way to a tabletop skeleton.
Thank you, Ms. Barker. Mr. McNally, do you have anything to add to that before we ask for discussion?
No, this was going to be part of my committee report. I was not aware we weren't going to do committee reports this evening, so.
Sorry.
It would have been nice to know that ahead of time, so.
That's a fair point. I apologize. We're just trying to be conservative on time. I appreciate
Understood.
that.
A phone call would have been nice.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Dr. Pearson and I will definitely do a better job of that next time. And anyone have any points of discussion on 9 through 12 wellness resources?
I do. I just clarification on the program Stop the Bleed materials. Could somebody talk about that a little bit, please?
Mrs. McCabe, can you tell me what your question is? You want to, what specifically do you need to know?
Stop the Bleed is a program, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is it being run by the nurses? Is it, I just wondered how we're utilizing that program and the purpose behind it. This first time otherwise I would have asked earlier, but I'm just curious. It's $4,000. I'm just wondering about that.
Yes, it will be taught by the nurses at the high schools.
Okay, thank you.
It will allow the students in the classrooms to have that certification then.
I apologize. I had someone come into my house. Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. McCabe and Mrs. Geyer. Everyone had their questions answered. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions regarding this item? I don't see any hands. Okay, I almost said Dr. Pearson. Ms. Radford, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Fairgrave,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. Okay, item C, the food service contract amendments during COVID for Quest. May I have a motion for that, please?
Slow move.
Mr. Mannheim, thank you. And second? Mr. McNally, thank you. And I believe Dr. Chapman is just going to give us a quick overview on that.
Yes, happy to do so. Thank you, Ms. Weibel. As I mentioned at the committee meeting, there are two different contracts. We've got our Organic Life, which will be next, and then this is our Quest for our high school. As you know, our food service companies have done a tremendous job of responding in some pretty challenging times, getting meals to our students as we requested. The contracts they'll have before you tonight is a way to adjust those contracts. Of course, these were unexpected occurrences for both our high school and K level. At the high school level, we were looking at a commission program, so there was no actual cost to us. But under this format, because Quest is unable to generate any kind of revenue, they're essentially only spending money. So this is a contract. The first document is a contract that essentially allows allows Quest to charge the district for those meals being served, plus an overhead charge of 5% on the work that they're doing. The second agreement really is more a formality. These are kind of out of sequence in terms of the order of the packet from when we got them. The first 2 weeks, it was just a way to memorialize the fact that they were going to cover those costs as well. So I don't have specific dollar amounts for costs on this program. However, what I can tell you is, and this information keeps getting updated on a regular basis, the reimbursement, which was not there at the high school program because we're not on the National School Lunch Program, we are now getting reimbursed for those meals, both breakfast and lunch. So the cost, while I can't give you an exact number, should not be significant and certainly would not drive this program into any kind of financial.
All right, thank you, Dr. Chapman. Before I ask for any other comments, I just want to thank you for your due diligence on these, as well as say that I know we've been partnering with Quest in both Organic Life and providing alternative food lunch programs, breakfast programs, and actually bags of groceries for our families. They've been amazing, as well as your team has been, in helping our families who need assistance during this time. And as Dr. Pearson said earlier, that any student is welcome to come get those lunch and breakfasts. They don't have to be on a free and reduced program. We're just here to help our community. And our two partnerships with both Quest and Organic Life, they've done a tremendous job in doing that. And so I just really appreciate them, the contracts aside. So thank you for your update.
Thank you.
Does anyone else, let me look at hands, have any comments or questions on this discussion? I know we did just have a meeting, but anyone else? I don't see any. Speak now or forever hold. Okay. Mrs. Ratchford, the roll, please.
Mr. Mannheim.
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe.
Yes.
Mr. McNally.
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Did we lose her?
I didn't hear. Mrs. Barker, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bryant.
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Yes.
Ms. Weigel.
Heard that one. Yes, motion passes 7-0. Okay. Zoom is such an experience. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. All right, moving on to item D, the food service contract amendments for Organic Life, very similar. Dr. Chapman will give us a little insight to that in just a moment. This is for the amendments during the COVID-19 pandemic. May I have a motion for that, please?
So move.
Mr. Mannheim.
Second.
Mr. McNally. All right, thank you. And Dr. Chapman.
Yeah, so Organic Life, this is our K program that's been on the National School Lunch Program. We did, and this actually applies to both this and Quest, but we did apply for what's called the Summer Seamless option back in middle of March, right when this happened. And so we've been able to increase our reimbursement levels without any additional requirements. And just today came out an announcement, which I heard about last week from ISB, in which we can switch over to what's called the Summer Food Service Program, which increases the minimum amount that we can get reimbursed by at least 57 cents per meal. So that's a huge addition. We will certainly, adjust our contract from Summer Seamless to the SFSP program this week and get that accomplished. And the net effect of that is the meal charges that you see in your contract are almost going to be completely covered through reimbursement on this program. So really the net cost to us is going to be the overhead cost and the labor hours that are associated with the K contract, which again should not be significant.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Chapman. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? It looks like no, but anybody? Okay. Mr. Ratchford, the roll, please.
Mrs. McCabe.
Yes.
Mr. McNally.
Yes.
Mrs. Barker.
Yes.
Mr. Bryant.
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve.
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. All right, thank you for all those action items, everybody. I appreciate that. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there anything that anyone would like pulled from the consent agenda? Sorry, this takes a minute to scroll through here. It doesn't look like it. Okay, so may I have a motion for the consent agenda, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. McNally.
Second.
Mr. Bryant, I believe that was the second. Mrs. Radford, the roll, please.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Barker,
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel.
Yes. Okay, consent passes 7-0, and all those items we did talk about at detail over the course of the last couple weeks and the year. So thank you very much for that. Item 7 for information, there were 2 items I think that were completed for FOIA. The FOIA processing time is definitely a little bit different right now due to COVID, and but we are following within the guidelines that were set out, new guidelines that were set out by the governor. You'll see your CUSD financial, Mid-Valley financial for February. There's a district enrollment report as we request every month. I should go back and clarify that consent passed 7-0. Did I say that? If I didn't, I am doing that now. Sorry. Okay, 8, new business. Does anyone have any new business? Other than Zoom is very interesting. Anybody? I don't see any new business. Okay. All right. 9, we have one item for discussion. It is about board agreements. So we wanted to, this is on the agenda per the IESB's recommendation from our meeting actually over, I'm trying to remember when it was, I think over the winter. And their recommendation was to just put it on for action, whether it be consent or action, and just approve our board agreements and publish those on our website under our board tab. So this is kind of a no biggie item, but I wanted to make sure that we put it up here in case anyone had any issue with it. So basically what it would be that list of agreements that's in your supplement package that we've talked about when we've been in board self-evals, which have typically been closed session. Those agreements have been edited over the years to what they are now. And I guess I want to open the floor to make sure that no one has any problem with putting this on for a vote in May to just publish onto the web and make it a public item. So it would just be under our tab under the website. So 1, are we fine with it? And 2, are we fine with it going on consent for May? So I open the floor to discussion. Wow. Okay, Ms. McCabe. I was gonna say not everybody at once, but I did see one hand.
I think it looks really great. I think it should be where the public can see what we are holding ourselves to. I think as any organization or group, holding ourselves accountable individually on our own selves is one thing, but holding each other accountable is always difficult, and that may be a piece that we're going to have to discuss as time goes on. But I think these reflect the work that we did earlier this year, and I think it should go to consent.
All right, thank you, Ms. McCabe. And for clarifying that, yes, this is a multiple levels of agreements that we've just, that are put together to hold ourselves accountable and each other accountable to bring us all to a higher level of serving. So thank you for clarifying that. Anybody else? Ms. Barker.
Yeah, I mean, I do certainly concur with Mrs. McCabe. I believe that the public should see what we're holding ourselves accountable to as well as each other. Do you think that it's something that may need additional explanation and discussion going forward on each item, however? I know it took us a while to.
You're asking me personally?
I'm just asking.
Oh, okay. I personally don't think we need, I mean, we've discussed this kind of at length at different meetings, in our internal meetings that have been with IESB. If it's on consent, it will be published in the board packet so the public can look at it. Are you asking about, like, do we want it on for action or consent? Is that what you're saying?
I just think maybe additional description might help. I know some of them are somewhat, there may be confusion about.
On some of the items?
Correct. I know
Okay.
we discussed them and what they meant to us.
That's a fair point. All right, team, what do we think? We have someone who's interested in putting an action. We have someone who's interested in putting a consent. We need a little bit of a straw poll here. You're gonna have to chime in. Chime.
Consent.
Consent.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mannheim. All right, Mr. Bryant?
I think consent as well. We talked about this, you know, when ISAB was here and you know, we put it together, the seven of us. I think we were all in agreement. It should go on consent the way it is.
Okay, I appreciate that. Who have I not heard from? Mr. McNally, Ms. Fairgrieve?
Consent is fine with me.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm fine with consent as well.
Okay. All right, Ms. Barker, if you would like, I'm happy to continue talking with you privately about this with your questions on it, or you can speak to Dr. Pearson with questions. He's also involved in this process, so it looks like that the group as a whole wants to go consent. Sound good? Are you there?
I'm here. Yes.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So we'll move forward as a team to put it on consent for May. And then Mrs. Barker, if you want to clarify any points, then we can certainly talk about that one-on-one or with Dr. Pearson. Okay. All right. Someone did ask me if we have closed session. We did discuss with legal. Sorry, was there any other issues about that? Are we good to move on? Okay. It is too difficult right now to do a closed session. If we do continue on more weeks where we are on Zoom and we are still under the order to be in our homes, we will try to figure out the bugs of being in a closed session on Zoom. But right now it is very, very difficult. So we had nothing that was pressing. And so again, to ISB rules, they asked us to hold off on anything that wasn't pressing. So we didn't need a closed session tonight. But should this continue for another month, or I don't want to say an extended amount of period of time, but if it does, then we will have to look into the legal parameters for us to have closed session. And Mr. Ratchford, Dr. Pearson, and I will continue to work on that and get back with you on how that all works, should we need to go there. Okay, and I think that is it. So it is 7:55. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. McNally and Ms. Barker. And Mrs. Ratchford, the roll. Let's do a roll out.
Sure.
It's
Mrs. Barker.
too hard to hear eyes on this.
Yes.
Mr. Bryant,
Yes.
Mrs. Fairgrieve,
Yes.
Mr. Mannheim,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Ms. Weibel.
Yes, so we have adjourned 7-0. We want to wish everyone a very happy evening. Continue to stay safe in your homes. Please continue to use social distancing and safe practices. Wash your hands, stay well. Remember that we do have the food service available. Should you need it, please continue to utilize it. And know that the district cares about you, and we are here available to help you with any of your needs for education or help with food during this time. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And team, thank you for all your hard work. Have a great evening.